Okay,
I
there we
love your
go.
mug, Jerry. It's so perfect.
She's wearing she's got her
And your jersey.
she's
Oh
got
my
her
gosh.
mug. Trust me,
This is
she was
so
ready.
good.
Was
She
she
was ready.
ready? I made this.
Obsessed.
I actually made
Did
this
you really?
jersey.
Yeah,
I did.
DIY'd
What?
this.
I DIY'd the felt and everything, and then on the back it says Hollander.
Yep.
The whole
That is
thing.
so impressive.
Yeah,
That's
they have two.
incredible.
They have both of them. They made both.
The Rosenoff
that's
as
so
well.
good.
That one was a little more complicated, but
Yeah.
I digress. I made a whole video about it. I made a whole reel about it because I
Wow.
was so obsessed. I mean, as everyone is.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
This is Unpacking the Closet Season 4, Rooted in Community. I'm Jerry.
And I'm Caitlin. Let's get into it.
Dr. Yamissette Westerband is a feminist scholar, a professor of women's, gender, and sexuality studies, and somebody who has spent her career giving people the language to understand their own experiences. Today, she's here to talk about pleasure. Who gets to have it, who gets shamed for wanting it, and what it actually means that millions of women can't stop watching Heated Rivalry. Welcome to the podcast.
The
Thank you.
topic
Thank
we
you for
all
having
been
me.
waiting for.
The topic we've all been waiting for. And of course, Bridgerton. Excited to talk about this too. I told Jerry Lynn I almost wore like a kind of Bridgerton inspired outfit. I was like, dang, I should have done it. That would have been really funny because I didn't know she was wearing her jersey.
You could show up all
literally
dressed
was
up in
like-
theme.
I literally like yelled at Ala down the hallway and I'm like, grab my jersey. I should be here.
So, Dr. Westerbrand, you study gender, sexuality, and popular culture for a living. So, when Heated Rivalry kind of blew up and the discourse started, right?
Yeah.
Everyone started asking, why are women so obsessed with this? And what was your immediate reaction as a scholar?
That's a good question. I think there was like multiple factors as to like why it was so popular, right? So I think the timing for sure, in terms of the historical moment that we're living in. Politically, right? We're seeing a lot of negative representation around masculinity, for example, a lot of like glorifying, particularly like toxic masculinity. And, Heated Rivalry has a lot of like really healthy, vulnerable masculinity in terms of when you think about, hegemonic masculinity. So like the most valued, most celebrated forms of masculinity in dominant society oftentimes include, factors such as sexual conquest in terms of men are supposed to sexually conquer women or sexually conquer other people in general. Right? Sort of if you think about hegemonic masculinity around sort of these notions of emotions in terms of men aren't supposed to be vulnerable. So think about like the notion of like boys don't cry, right? Suck it up. Don't be a girl. And so Heated Rivalry really challenges these notions of masculinity in terms of you're seeing a vulnerable form of sexuality, right? You're seeing men being emotionally vulnerable as well in terms of, when you see Ilya, for example, talking about his dad and crying, right? Or when you see Shane, again, also emoting in ways that feel really open, that feel really soft. And so it's almost like giving permission to see a different form of masculinity that we're not used to seeing in our society. And so I think people are really hungry for that, particularly women. Right? I think, again, we're sort of like being spoon-fed these ideas of like macho men who are dominating, who are degrading, who are disrespectful, and we're supposed to sort of accept that. And I think a lot of people are really, really having difficulty right now in terms of turning on the TV and constantly being bombarded with those kinds of images. And so I think this was really refreshing for a lot of people. And it felt like an escape from, what we're seeing every day on the news as well, right? In terms of a very specific form of masculinity, right? In terms of very, again, toxic, dominant, degrading masculinity versus soft, vulnerable, healthy, well-rounded masculinity. So I think that's part of it. I also think it has a lot to do with in terms of sexuality, like female sexuality. So like when you look at, for example, depictions on screen around female sexuality, oftentimes, again, there's a power dynamic like happening where, again, women are being objectified, where the assumption is that any sort of female sexuality is there for the consumption of heterosexual male audiences, right? Where female audience members are watching and they're like, is she enjoying this? Is she actually, having a good time? Is she being traumatized? How does this bring up things around your own trauma as well, right? In terms of female audience members, we'll talk about how oftentimes when they watch sex scenes, et cetera, or they watch pornography, et cetera, they're sort of having to sort of do sort of mental gymnastics around it of like, okay, like, is she really having a good time? How does this make me feel? Am I comparing myself to the woman on screen, for example? What does this bring up for me? Does this bring up trauma, right? And so it becomes difficult almost in terms of like engaging in fantasy when you're having all of that swimming around in your head. And so I think, in terms of particularly like women watching these scenes where they can almost like disassociate. They don't have to think about like their own sort of relationship to sexuality, their own relationship to desire, a relationship to pleasure, right? You're just able to like enjoy the fantasy in a way that feels freeing, that feels liberating, right? That feels
Yeah.
fun, right? It feels uncomplicated, right? And so I think
Yeah.
that's a huge part of it in terms of like the reaction. I think also, I think a lot of sapphics love the show. Like, I don't know if you've ever been like at a bar, like, or like a party where like that song, All the Things She Said comes on.
Yeah.
Like lesbians go wild for this. Why is that, right? Why is that? I think multiple reasons, right? I think also like in terms of like, the Shane and Ilya storyline is all about like yearning. And sapphics love yearning, you know what I mean?
that's
They
the
do
truth.
love like, like the stolen glances from across the room, like
Yeah.
that whole narrative, right? Sapphics are eating that shit up, right? And also in terms of like, the long game, right? In terms of like their story really is around the long game. Like it takes them, what is it, like 5 to 7 years or something before they actually
Yeah.
like
Yep.
realize like the romance, even though they're hooking up, right? And so I think,
They're like, oh, we're
especially sapphics,
boyfriends now.
yeah, after like 7 years of sleeping together,
7
they're finally
years
like,
later.
okay, now we're together, right? And so I think
Right.
also there's sort of like that appreciation around the long game.
Mhm.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And I think also just in terms of how sexuality is depicted in ways that feel sort of, that feel really empowering, but also it's sexy, right? Like there's a power dynamic there. Like Ilya, for example, is more dominant. He's more of a top, right? But even as he's dominating Shane, he's asking for consent.
Mm,
He's constantly like every scene that you see, he's
That
asking,
was
is this
so
okay?
well done. The
yeah.
consent
Yeah,
in the show was
yeah,
so well done.
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And so it's like even though you're seeing the steamy power dynamic, right? Where Shane is bottoming, it still feels very safe. Because he's constantly
Yeah.
asking, like, are you okay? Are you enjoying this? Does this work for you? In ways
Which
again
is
that feel
something,
empowering.
and it's something we don't get from men a lot. As women, we don't normally
Yeah.
get that. So it's
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
refreshing to see.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely, right? Yeah. And so I think there's that element. I think also the fact that it's sort of like you get the happy ending at the end, right? Even though it takes years, right? I think in terms of like, seeing queer joy, I think is really important here, right? Of oftentimes when queer folks are represented on screen, it's often the kill your gaze trope, right? Of like, if you're
Mhm.
queer, you must either suffer, right? You must basically pay penance for your sins, quote unquote, right? And so queer folks are often represented as, suicidal, which is real, right? But or depressed or villainous, predatory, or mentally ill. We're not allowed to experience joy on screen. And so this is different in terms of they get to have the joy at the end, right? They get familial
Yeah.
acceptance, for example, right? They get the possibility of even in terms of like coming out, right? In terms of the storyline, was it Scott Hunter? I forget the other
Mhm.
character's name.
Mhm.
Yeah. Hunter.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
And
Yeah,
Kip.
Hunter, but like Kip, right? In
Yeah.
terms of like coming out, right? And visibility, right? I think a lot of people also like really associated with that, right? In terms of like the very real experience of, feeling necessarily comfortable of being out, of fearing
Mm.
discrimination, fearing, familial rejection, that very real experience, then finally coming out and being embraced, right? And being empowered again and being, celebrated in ways
I
that feel
think
really
that was really
refreshing.
healing for a lot of people to
Yeah.
see. I know for me
Yeah.
watching through, I didn't really have a background watching the show. I just like saw
Mhm.
the commercials, thought it would be really cool, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch
Yeah.
it. And the whole
Yeah.
time up until the last episode, I was waiting for the shoe to drop. Because as a queer
Mm.
person, that's always what you're waiting for. And as a queer person who had no idea that there was going to be a happy ending, I literally was just like, okay, I'm going to watch this show. Every scene that you would think something bad might happen, I was on the edge of my seat, like covering my eyes, like, okay, what's going to happen? And then the fact that there
Yeah.
wasn't that, at the end, I was like, oh my God, I have to watch this again. What do you mean the
Yeah.
shoe didn't drop for them?
Yep.
Now I
And
can
I thought-
enjoy it. Now that
I
I
can
know
enjoy
that
it.
it's not going to be.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not going to be like
Yep.
something horrifying happening. And I
Yeah.
think that was really, really beautiful in a way, because you're right, we
Mhm.
don't get those kinds of stories. And I was so jazzed to see that
Yeah.
be that way for a change.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, like I love the narrative of like when the mom, the converse, like Shane's mom, right? And when she's
Mhm.
like, she's upset, right? And as a viewer, like as you mentioned, Jerry, like I was like, oh gosh, like is she gonna reject him, right? Like she seems
Yeah.
upset, like she's she's
Yeah.
upset that he's gay, right? And it's like, no, she's upset because she didn't make it safe enough for him to come out.
Yeah.
She's upset because he had to like, keep it from her for so long, keep it from, both parents for
I
so
almost
long, right?
cried. I
Yeah.
was like, what?
Amazing. amazing though. You don't often see that, right? And so I agree in
Mhm.
terms of like this notion of like, yeah, the anxiety that we have as queer audience members around like, oh gosh, what's gonna happen next? Or like, gosh, someone has to suffer, right? Someone has to
Yeah.
pay for their
Mhm.
sins in some way, right? And when I say sins, I mean, in terms of like, very sort of like rhetorical, right? In terms of like, no, not
Right.
their sins, but that's how it's represented on screen,
Right.
right? And I think we're taught also as audience members to like almost accept the crumbs. And so it's like,
Yep.
okay, it's queer representation. So it's like, I guess any form of representation is better than no representation. Or at least that's what we're told, right? That's how we're sort of conditioned as queer audience
Yeah.
members. And so it's really again like really empowering, really liberating to see a different form of representation on screen that doesn't require us to sort of manipulate our minds around like, okay, well, they die at the end, right? Or they're a villain, right? Or they suffer, but it's okay because at least you saw someone queer on screen. At least it's something,
Yeah.
Right.
right? And so I think this is again, I think that what's so like exciting about this is like you see a different form of representation that really challenges those stereotypes. Yeah, and in terms of like in Hollywood, it's like there's a whole long history around like queer representation and censorship and all of that, right? So sort of moving away from that feels really, really exciting, particularly right now in this historical moment,
Yeah.
when a lot of queer rights are being, pushed back in terms of a lot
Yeah.
of queer rights are being challenged. And so people again are, they're hungry for empowering stories, empowering narratives, ones that like allow you to sort of live fully in your body and not have to live with shame, or stigma around being queer.
Yeah.
There's something really specific that women describe about watching Heated Rivalry, a sense of safety, of not being looked at, of being freed from self comparison, as you were saying earlier. Fans talk about mutual pleasure, consent, tenderness between the two leads. What does it say about the state of female pleasure in media that these things feel so radical?
Yeah, because I feel like women aren't allowed to enjoy sexuality in ways that are empowering when you look at media representation. Oftentimes, the assumption is that any sort of female sexuality on screen is really there for, again, a heterosexual, cisgender male audience. And so it's this notion of like, okay, sexuality that doesn't feel dominating, that doesn't feel humiliating, that doesn't feel objectifying, right? But just a very empowered form of sexuality, which is so rare to see. And so I think for, audience members, particularly like female audience members, again, they're really craving an alternative form of sexuality. And I feel like this show in some ways is almost a representation of the female gaze, right? So the female gaze really challenges these notions of the male gaze of like, yeah, like in terms of the male gaze, oftentimes what you see are very like sort of one-dimensional characters, particularly female characters, right? In terms of like not very nuanced. She's either the sex pot or she's like the angry shrew, right? She's either hypersexualized or she's asexual. And I feel like in terms of when you're seeing these different forms of like sexual representation, it's sort of like, no, women are allowed to enjoy sexuality, right? They're allowed to enjoy desire and pleasure and all of those things in ways that doesn't require them to be, again, demeaned, humiliated, objectified. And so it feels really radical in a lot of ways because we're not used to seeing that. Like we're starting to see a little bit of like more and more of that, but it's
Yeah.
still like, it's very rare, honestly.
Yeah.
Right. And so I feel like people like when they do see it, like even if they can't name it, even if they can't define it, they're like, this feels different and this feels good. And it's like
Yeah.
I want more of that, right? In terms of like again craving something, yeah, something that feels empowering, something that
Yeah.
you don't walk away and you're just like, oh, that felt kind of gross, or like, oh, I have to sort of pick and choose the parts that feel okay and the parts like feel demeaning, right? And I feel like we often have to do that as female audience members. And I
Yeah.
think especially like as like sapphic audience members, like as a lesbian, right? I think that's a whole other story in terms of like what we see on screen and how again we have to sort of almost like disassociate when we watch on screen just to be able to enjoy like in terms of like whatever's on screen.
Yeah.
It's so interesting the way you're talking about this, just because I mean, like, I mean, I'm a professor, I study this stuff too, but it's interesting. I don't study media, I study psychology. So it's a little bit of a different subject. And as you're talking, I'm thinking through all the ways in which I have had to turn off the TV or stop watching shows because I felt like I couldn't relate to the female character on the show at all. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
this doesn't jive. This doesn't feel good. Like, I don't want to watch this. Like, it feels cringy to me. And to put words to that is so powerful.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't want to like, digress too much in terms of talking about other shows, but when you were talking about that, right, I thought of like, there's one show in particular that I was like watching and I was almost like hate watching or almost like watching to study it a little bit, called Landman. I don't know if you've seen it, like if you've ever
No,
watched
I
any
haven't
episodes of
seen
it,
it.
right? It's on Paramount. The way it's like it's a Taylor Sheridan show, right? And the way the women are written on this show, again, they're either like bimbos right? Or like extremely angry, or in ways that are like in terms of like the sort of trope of like, the angry woman trope who's like, she's like bitter because she's not married, she can't find a man, right? Yeah, or either that or it's like again, she's there for like basically the pleasure of the male audience members. And like I would watch this show and I'd be like, okay, I hate watching it, but I'm also studying it kind of thing. But at the same time, there came a point where I was like, you know what, I can't watch this anymore. Like I was just like, I had to stop because it felt so violating even to just like be, like be in that energy. It just felt like, okay, this feels too gross. Like I can't, like for my own sort of like emotional, spiritual well-being, I have to sort of walk away. And I feel like that happens a lot. And I feel like it happens more and more, right? Especially right now with what's happening politically. I feel like we're seeing a reflection of what's happening politically in media representation. Media often,
Absolutely.
mirrors what's happening in terms of larger society, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like you're seeing a lot of like sort of a lot of negative stereotypes in terms of female representation and also queer representation coming back on screen.
Yeah. Yeah, you are. You know, that actually does kind of lead into our next question, which is like historically been women's desire has been policed and shamed and defined by what men want from them, right? And when women are drawn to male romance, and that has been in like fan fiction spaces for decades, right? It's not like this is necessarily a new thing, but they often get dismissed or pathologized. What is your read on why women are seeking out pleasure on their own terms, and why is that still such like a cultural phenomenon? Why are we still so like, I don't know what the right word would be, but it still seems to trigger something that it's like such a weird thing that women would be like intrigued by this.
Yeah. I mean, I think what came to mind as soon as you asked the question was slut shaming. I feel like, you know what I mean, in terms of, again, empowered female sexuality is often punished on screen. So I think about, for example, like I teach like about horror films in terms of killing by slut shaming, right? In terms of every single sexually empowered
Every
woman on horror
time.
films, she has to die, right?
Yeah.
She's gone. Yeah.
You gotta die. If she has sex, she has to die, right? So it's literally slut shaming by killing, right? And I feel like you see that all of the time, again, in terms of like, why aren't women allowed to enjoy a sexuality that is empowered, that is also independent of men and male pleasure, right? Because that's threatening to society. That's threatening to a patriarchal society in terms of, again, sort of being able to own your sexuality, being able to enjoy your sexuality. That feels really threatening in a patriarchal society where women are really supposed to function to support men, including sexually, you know?
You know what
And
that
I
makes me think of? Go on.
We both are like, you know what?
Make me think of.
No. You go, because I want to see if you were thinking the same thing as me.
It's probably different. It brought up Kanye West for me.
Oh, no,
Okay.
different. What do you
Because
Okay. How so? Like
so back when I was in college doing feminist studies, I was looking at, psychological, like feminist psychology. And so one of my presentations was on Kanye West's Monster video, which got a lot of backlash back in the day because essentially it's all these sexy women that are dead everywhere in the music video. And he's just going around playing with these women who are like literally like just blank face, like not there, either dissociated or dead. And it's one of those ones that I think got taken off. But what's interesting to me is I want to say that was around like 2014 or something. So that's a little over a decade ago. But what's interesting to me is how that wouldn't be uncommon to see today either. There's also this phenomenon that connects. I promise it connects. There was this phenomenon that I was watching on I think it was Instagram or TikTok, one of those things, where people are talking about the increase of Botox and women's lack of emotional response, and how, how popular it is for women not to have kind of like that, like deadpan, like response, like not being able to be like expressive, and how Botox might be contributing to that. I don't know, just thoughts that came up as you were talking about that, because it just seems like like that conform really is kind of limiting for women in a lot of ways.
Yeah. It made me think of like when you were talking, it made me think about the dead girl trope, which is basically, it's like not to go too far down like a rabbit hole, but basically it's this like a TV show or a movie where a young woman is found dead, right? And oftentimes it opens where she's dead, but it's also she's like naked, right? And it's implied that she was sexually assaulted. And if you think about it, it's sort of like as a corpse, like it's like the most passive form of like in terms of being a woman, right? It's the most passive form of femininity. And so it's like, she's been victimized, she's been assaulted, etc., while still being objectified on screen in terms of oftentimes like the camera will like pan over her like naked dead body. And so in some ways it's sort of like the ultimate sort of portrayal of like she can't talk back, right? She can't resist, she can't consent, right? But again, she's there for consumption, right? In terms of like as a viewer, you're taking it all in, and she literally has no voice. She literally has no personality. She doesn't have a pulse, That's kind of what it made me think of, right? In terms of like this notion of like patriarchal society really wants a woman who is passive in every single way. Passive, but also sexually available. But sexually available for male pleasure.
To men.
Let's be very clear. To men.
I don't know if I can say this on the air, so we might have to bleep it, but it's the, what is it? The Madonna whore complex?
Yeah.
Right? The virgin whore dichotomy, where we're expected to be pure, but yet have all this sexual experience and be readily available, but not really have sex, but actually be ready for it at all times.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely. Yeah.
Now, see, what it made me think of, and even more when you just said that, is kind of this segue where we did want to kind of talk about Bridgerton. And it does make me think of this whole thing that's happening with the announcement of the next season of Bridgerton and who our two leads are going to be. And it's very interesting to me that while we have all of these women and even men very excited over Heated Rivalry and loving it, they are like, and women astoundingly to me, and we can get into that on why you think that is, but very, very angry about the fact that we have now a first WLW, woman season with Francesca and Michaela at the center of the love story. And some of these same straight women who couldn't get enough of the men in Heated Rivalry are losing their minds. So I'm really interested in what is your reaction to that? What do you think is happening there? And what does it expose about like queerness and how consumable that is for the normal audience?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot happening. There's a lot happening there. And you're right, in terms of what, like when you read about it, like the majority of resistance is coming from heterosexual women. And also heterosexual women who are consuming Heated Rivalry, and we're all about it, as you mentioned, right? And so I think multiple things. I think, well, like when you read sort of the blogs online or whatever, they'll argue that it's, the storyline is deviating from the book in terms of Michaela was supposed to be Michael, right? So there's a gender swap, and they're like, oh, you're not being, it's like you're not being loyal to the story. BS. I don't know if I can say that on screen, like bullshit, right? Like that is not what's happening here.
I love it.
You know what I mean? Like, no, that's not what's happening at all. Like in terms of, I think what's happening is like, first of all, audience members are not comfortable again with seeing two women on screen in terms of a sapphic relationship that again isn't about a heterosexual male gaze, right? I think also the fact that Michaela is a woman of color, particularly a Black woman, right? You're seeing misogynoir there in terms of a Black woman as a central character, and she's a lesbian. Are you kidding me? That is like too much for people to like think about or consume, right? I think also the fact it's an interracial relationship, I think that has a lot to do with it as well, right? In terms of people are uncomfortable with that. I think all of the elements in terms of intersectionality, right? Like they were okay with an interracial relationship as long as it was heterosexual. But now it's a sapphic interracial relationship. Forget it, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's that element. I think, again, the fact that it's almost like, women are arguing also that this is betrayal to John, the character of John, because like, having a sapphic storyline so soon after he died, it feels like it cheapens the romance that John and Francesca had. I'm not buying that. Honestly, I think that's BS. I think, again, it's this idea of like, wait a minute, these women get to enjoy their sexuality and it doesn't depend on a man. I think that's what's happening. I also think some people are upset about Eloise not being the queer character in terms of, because she's so queer coded. She is so queer coded.
Yes.
Right. So she's a feminist. She loves to read. She's not interested at all in the marriage market. Right. Like she's grossed out like whenever she's introduced to a man. Right. And you're like, so as like a sapphic audience member, right, I'm watching this and I'm like, yeah, lesbian, right? Like you're reading between the lines as queer audience members are often asked to do, and being like, yes, there's a lesbian on screen. And so I think also, honestly, I think some queer audience members feel a little betrayed by that in terms of like, okay, we've basically been queer baited for several seasons and kind of hoping that she'll eventually come out, right? And Hollywood has a way of doing that in terms of queer baiting and queer coding, right? Where they're giving you little hints of like, oh, yeah, she's queer. Oh, yeah, she's definitely a lesbian. She's going to come out, and she never does, right? And so I think there's also a frustration around that of like, yo, you kind of like let us on for like, and I hate to even use that terminology, right? But you teased us with this sort of like notion of like, she's queer, and now suddenly she's not the queer character. So I think there's that element as well. I also think in terms of seeing a femme on screen, seeing two femmes on screen, in terms of like seeing two feminine lesbians on screen, again, in a way that doesn't seem to be two feminine lesbians on screen, to sexually titillate a man. But really it's about their love story and like their sexuality for each other and for themselves, I think is unusual. And I think people are uncomfortable with that. So it's again, when we see like lesbians on screen, it's like, okay, as long as it's palatable, as long as they're like, sort of hegemonically good looking, but again, they're performing for men with the assumption that eventually the man will come into the screen, right? And sort of like finish the scene.
Yeah.
Two women together without the man is suddenly very threatening because God forbid two women enjoy sexuality without.
They don't need him.
Yeah, without a phallus, right? Because it's not phallocentric in nature, honestly, because it's not, we're often, again, assumptions are that sexuality, particularly female sexuality, is phallocentric. It is dependent on like a man. It's dependent on a penis, right? And so when you're seeing a deviation that, yep, exactly. And so suddenly you don't have that. And it's like, wait a minute, these women are empowered and independent and they get to like enjoy sex without the dude? What's going on here? Absolutely not, right? And it's interracial. And you're seeing a Black woman on screen in a way that's not, demoralizing, that's not one-dimensional, that's not in terms of, playing up to like in terms of different stereotypes that you historically see in terms of Black female representation. It's too much for people.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous, right?
It's a really interesting point too, because the argument that I was hearing a lot of was historically it's inaccurate. And I'm like, well, the whole show is historically inaccurate. Also, not to mention, if we're talking about that time period, we had Anne Lister up in England who married, well, we just passed Easter last weekend, but literally married on Easter in the back of a church, exchanging rings with her wife now, in the pew because it wasn't legalized. And so the queer people have always existed in history. And I find that such a null and void argument to say, well, it never happened, so we shouldn't be showing it on screen. I'm like, well, Bridgerton is all fantasy. The whole thing is fantasy. From the beginning.
Well, and it happened more often than people really want to talk about. In reality, a lot of high-class women were able to be queer and out in society because of the fact that they could hide it, because it was so common and accepted for women during that period to be really good friends and hold hands and do everything together. That was something that was just kind of okay, that as long as you were high enough in society that people couldn't say much to you and you were willing to toe the line in terms of what you did in front of people's faces, regardless of the fact that they knew that those women were living together and everybody knew behind the scenes there was probably more to that relationship, because they towed the line and women held hands anyway, as long as you weren't kissing in public, people were willing to pretend it didn't happen. They were willing to be like, oh, they're just roommates, right? The typical that we hear all the time.
Well, also money. Money had a huge thing. The reason Anne Lister was able to do all that, and people knew, there's records of people basically saying like, hey, you got to watch it when you're in public, Anne, because people are getting mad about it. But because it was so common for women to inherit that way, and the only way that they would be able to hold that money is to not marry men. And so women figured this out of higher class and chose not to.
Yeah.
I don't know. The historical argument makes me so mad.
Yeah. Everyone should watch that show, by the way.
It's so good.
Gentleman Jack.
But it's so good.
Gentleman Jack. Yes.
Oh my God, so good.
She's so good in it. And she's so hot also. I'm sorry. Not to objectify her, but she's so damn hot. Like, my God.
It's so true. Right? The scenes of that were great. If Bridgerton could only live up.
So sexy.
Gentleman Jack.
Right? That's a good challenge. Bridgerton, if you're listening. Okay.
Gentleman Jack is the standard. We expect you to
really
meet
should
it.
Be, right?
There is a part of me though that wonders, and I'm interested in your opinion about it, is I do kind of wonder if people, straight women included, would have had an easier time with Eloise being the one coming out as queer because of all the queer coding that had already happened and the fact that she was already othered, because of the fact she's not as femme. She dresses the same, right? Because everyone had to, but she's not as femme, and because of the fact that she's white. And I do kind of wonder if all of those factors, if people would have been more willing to accept it.
Oh yeah, I feel like it's super multi-layered, right? I feel like
Yeah.
we've had a few seasons also in terms of almost like warming the audience up to the idea that she might be queer, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that there's that element. And so it's sort of like if she were to come out, it's like, okay, no big surprise there, right? But I think you're onto
Yeah.
something as well in terms of the fact that she's not as femme, right? I think that makes people a little bit more comfortable with this idea of like, okay, if you're a femme, I don't know if you've experienced this or in terms of like how you identify, right? But as a femme lesbian, for example, I've had this experience of being told like, you don't look like a lesbian. Are you sure you're a
Yes.
lesbian? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like maybe you
All
just
the
haven't met the
time.
right man, right? And so the assumption is that if you're feminine, if you're a feminine
Yeah.
lesbian, it's sort of like, why aren't you sexually available for men,
Mhm.
Yep.
right? And somehow it's a betrayal to your femininity. It's a
Yeah.
betrayal to your gender.
Yeah.
And so I think there's that element as well, right? In terms of this idea of like, if you're feminine, you're supposed to be available, sexually available for men. And so I feel like with Eloise, I feel like it's a little bit more palatable because it's like she's made it clear from the get-go that that's not her jam. She's not interested in men, right? At least we don't think she is in the ways that we're supposed to sort of be as women, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's that element, but I also think there's a little bit of like femphobia happening for sure,
Mhm. Yeah.
Always with the femme phobia.
right? It's so
But
crazy.
I really do feel that way because I think Eloise very quickly, season 1, all of us fell in love with her, straight woman included,
Yeah.
and she became a big fan favorite. People love her. They love her humor. They love her reactions to men. They have no problem with the fact that
Yeah.
she isn't interested at all. So I
Mhm.
do think I agree that if it was her that was coming out, if they had centered her as the sole queer female, I think it would
Mhm.
have been a very different reaction. So yeah, I think it does speak a lot to how we feel about femme women and,
Mhm.
like you said, how we feel about a femme queer Black woman being the other lead. And that makes me think of also this last presidency, right? The fact
Mhm.
that people just weren't able to get over the hump of the idea of like Kamala being president. She was okay as VP when she was under a white man, but the idea of then putting her in charge, right, as a woman of color who was so powerful and so sure of herself, people just couldn't get there.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think it's multi-layered again in terms of thinking about intersectionality, right? Where it's like, it's not only sexism, but it's also racism. And the way these things combine create a very unique form of oppression.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what you're seeing in terms of this reaction. That it's not
Yeah.
only the fact that she's a woman, not only the fact that she's queer, but also like a queer woman of color. That is just too much for people to quote unquote bear, right? And we'll see in terms of like maybe once the show comes out and we see the kind of representation and it's empowering and it's, it's amazing and maybe it's sexy, whatever, like maybe audience members will get around it.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Who knows? Hopefully,
I hope
but we'll
so.
see.
I
I
mean,
hope so. Yeah, I
I'm
hope so
hoping
too.
so. I
Yeah.
think Francesca too, another layer we haven't quite dove into, but the neurodiversity of that
Mm.
Francesca kind of represents. I mean, and the actress has talked about it. I know it's been a topic online too. And I love this kind of diversity of queerness we're seeing in this couple already before we even
Yeah.
get to really see them interact in that way, because we haven't really even seen that yet as an audience, and people are just reacting to what they're going to see, not even what's been shown yet. And I think that's probably the most surprising part for me, is like we haven't even seen what's there and the reaction is so strong. And you're right, I think these intersecting identities, these multiple layers, all add to that. And this is why I'm a big fan of Shonda Rhimes, though, because she really loves to mix it up and show representation of the things that we see as human beings all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think of like, in terms of Heated Rivalry, not to bring it back to that show, but in terms of Shane's character is also neurodivergent, right? Like they've talked about that. And however, audience members don't seem to react in the same way. Or maybe sometimes I feel like some audience members didn't even pick up on it, right? Until it was sort of overtly spoken, right? But I feel like the reaction isn't the same. And why is that? What's going on there? In terms of, I feel like some audience members have issues with Francesca's neurodivergence in the way that they didn't with Shane's neurodivergence.
And from my perspective, being that I study psychology, neurodivergence tends to be undiagnosed in women primarily. So to me, I feel like maybe that's part of it too, is like it's not as represented because people assume that women can't be, which is not true.
Yeah.
And I think all of us could agree on that part. You know, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we'll see how it's
Yeah.
played out, but I'm super interested. But that's a really good point too, is, you know, no one's having that same reaction to Shane, even though that was talked about as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I wonder if it comes back to women and the issues that people have, or what they see or don't
Yeah.
see in women
Well,
representation.
and this also could be an indicator of a little bit of ableism.
Yes.
Ableism
Mm-hmm.
in a little way. And again, right, as we've kind of talked about already over this episode so far, everything tends to be heightened for women, right? When it's something with a woman, people have a harder time with it. And ableism a lot of times kind of tells us that, like, oh, well, she looks normal, she's pretty, she's
Mm-hmm.
femme, so she
Mm-hmm.
can't be neurodivergent,
Yeah.
right? And that's just not the way it works. People who are neurodivergent don't look a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people have a picture in their mind. And a lot of that is ableism, thinking that just because someone has something different than you, well, they
Mm-hmm.
must look different. There must be a marker. They can't be attractive. How would they find a person, let alone two people to love them? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think you could also go into that realm with both of these.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
100%.
It makes me think of like I've been reading a lot lately around like ADHD and particularly how it's
Mm-hmm.
being more diagnosed with women sort of like in their 40s or when they're going through perimenopause, right? In terms
Mm,
of what's happening there. I think it speaks to like everything you're talking about, right? In terms of women tend to get diagnosed later or don't get diagnosed at all, right? Because it
yeah.
shows up differently for women, right? And I also think in terms of like, the medical field in general is also super misogynistic, right? And like female bodies are not studied, right?
Yep.
Yeah, there's so much like lack of
Cars,
information around
seatbelt.
like yeah like whether it be like female health or in terms of like mental health
Mm-hmm.
or in terms of ability, etc., right? There's just like a lack of research around it, and so I think that's also representative of that, and you're seeing that in real time in terms of also like how audience members are reacting to like a
Yeah.
neurodivergent female character on screen.
Yeah.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
That's a
No,
Yeah.
that's a really
absolutely.
good point. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, if we go into kind of more your actual field, right? And what you do,
Sure.
you teach women's gender and sexuality studies, and you've
Sure.
described your classroom as being a space where students get the language to kind of understand and explain their experiences. How do you approach teaching pleasure and desire in an academic setting? And what do students usually bring in that surprises you?
Question. I think I tend to like try to approach it almost by asking questions,
Mm,
right? And so when we have these conversations around, for example, like female pleasure, in terms of in desire, I often ask around like, okay, so how did you learn about sex? How did you learn in terms of about menstruation? How did you learn about pleasure? How did you learn about consent? How did you learn about in terms of asking for what you want in bed? Did you learn about that?
yeah.
Who had those conversations with you? How did you learn about masturbation? Who had those conversations with you, right? And often the responses are very shame-based, to be honest with you. It's either like, oh, we don't talk about sex in our household. Like, what are you talking about? Those are not conversations we had. Are you kidding? Or if the conversations were had, they were often, again, shaming in
Mm,
terms of like, oh, you're not supposed to masturbate, especially girls. Girls don't
yeah.
masturbate, right? It's sort of this narrative of like, men are sort of depicted as like being hypersexual. They're supposed to be sexual. They're supposed to engage in sexual domination. Women were supposed to be sexually submissive, right? Sexually available, but submissive, not
Yeah.
empowered, right? And you're not supposed to, again, enjoy sex. And
Hmm.
so if you do enjoy sex, if you happen to be empowered and ask for what you want, right, or be proud of enjoying your sexuality, oftentimes the response is slut shaming.
Yeah.
The message being like you're not allowed to do that. That's not okay. There's something wrong with you if you actually enjoy sex and are vocal about it, right? Are you empowered about it? If you actually have a good relationship with your body, if you don't have body image issues, because again, women are taught to be embarrassed about their bodies, right? Think about in
Yes.
terms of like the discourses that we have around like vulvas. It's often shaming, right?
Yeah.
Of like dirty, smelly, right? Gross, etc. Think about
Yep.
conversations that we have about menstruation, right? The curse, quote unquote, right? Gross. You don't talk about it. You're supposed to be embarrassed when you buy tampons. Right?
Hmm.
There's all of this sort of secrecy, shame, and stigma associated with women's bodies and sexuality. And it's really hard to sort of outgrow those narratives because we're living in it. We're immersed in
Yeah.
it. It's in the wallpaper, right? It's all around us. It's
Yeah.
something that it's really hard to escape. And so we internalize these messages, right? And they play out in our everyday lives. And so I often have those conversations in terms of, again, asking them to sort of reflect around, okay, what's your relationship to your own sexuality? When the first time you had sex? How did that feel? Was it empowering for you? Was it enjoyable? Did you feel comfortable sort of speaking up in terms of asking for what you wanted, right? Did you feel embarrassed? Do you feel comfortable in your skin in terms of your own body?
Yeah.
Were you afraid of being judged by your partner? If you afraid of being evaluated by your partner, for example? Were you afraid that your partner wouldn't like your body or wouldn't even, wouldn't like your vulva, for example? I can't tell you how many students will talk about that, right? In terms of like when they open up, right? Around fears around like, oh, is it ugly? Does it smell bad, etc. These are all narratives that we've been taught to sort of internalize.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to to move away from that. Even as a feminist, right? It's sort of like I'm not immune to those, sort of those discourses, right? Those conversations, those ideas that pop up in your head in terms of around sexuality and shame, etc. And so just to answer your question, I guess it's just sort of reflective around like how does that show up in your own lives and how do we challenge that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny when you ask those questions, immediately like answers popped up in my head as soon as you ask
Yeah.
things, right? Like you think of things, and especially and I'm sure maybe Jerry Lynn, maybe you feel the same way for me being a bi woman, right? And having been with
Mm-hmm.
men primarily when I was younger, right?
Mm-hmm.
So most of my formative years, it was all experiences with men. You do get a lot of, and it starts before you have a sexual partner. I have things that I work through today that I realize go back to like random things my dad said to
Mm-hmm.
me, because your dad is the first male, right, that you listen to. And I had my dad tell me one time when I think it was in junior high, like he told me that I needed to start either shaving or plucking certain areas, right? Like your like hair right beneath your belly button, or right in like your bikini line area, things like that, because boys don't like that.
Yeah.
That's gross, and women shouldn't have hair there. So you need to start shaving that, right? And that's as young as junior high.
Yeah.
And then you start being with boys and men, boys, really boys, because they don't know, right? Like they're young and they say whatever they've been taught. And I had a guy, well, he was a man. He was 10 years older than me. I was only 20 when I was dating him, and he was about 10 years older than me. And I told him I wanted a belly button ring, and he told me I didn't have the body for that. My body wasn't good enough for a belly button ring, right?
When will men learn that clothes are meant to be worn? Jewelry is meant to be worn. If you have a body, you can wear whatever you want.
Right, exactly. But even this theory, even this feeling of like, I know a lot of men felt this way too, was like, say, oral pleasure, right? Men are very strange about the fact that like they feel like if they do that to you, they can come back up, kiss you, do whatever they want. But I had several men tell me that if I did that to them, then I was not allowed to kiss them after. That was gross.
Interesting.
Right? So you learn, it's very strange, the things that like you learn from experiences from men and are taught that do stay with you, that you do, like you said, have to work through later in life.
Absolutely. It totally resonates, Caitlin, like in terms of like, I also like before I came out, like I identify as a lesbian, right? But like before I came out, I dated boys in college. And I think back to those sexual relationships in terms of, like the first time I had sex, I had sex later on, like in college kind of thing. But I remember in terms of like my partners feeling so comfortable in terms of making comments about my body, right? Telling me that I needed to work out, etc. Telling me like to watch what I eat, right? And again, like at least for me, I was young and I didn't feel comfortable or empowered enough, or even like I didn't know, you don't know what you don't know, right? I didn't know that like this was not okay. And you could say like, like screw that, like, like I don't have to put up with this, right? As opposed to again internalizing those ideas and then feeling embarrassed, right? Or feeling I almost have to apologize for your body. And I remember like, like going through those relationships, and I think it really sort of also impacts like how much pleasure I had. Like I don't know if this is too personal, but like it wasn't until I was with women that I actually had an orgasm. Right? I dated men for many years, and like it was almost like, okay, like sex is fine, but like whatever. And it wasn't until I was with a woman that I was like, that's what all the fuss is about. That's what they're talking about, right? And I think some of it had to do with the fact that I felt more comfortable in terms of being able to like be in my skin with another woman, right? Where I felt less evaluated, right? I felt like less like I was being again sort of like sized up in terms of like, do I measure up? Versus I can just sort of be myself and be comfortable, right? And I think it definitely impacts pleasure.
Yeah.
If you can't sort of relax, if you're worried about, again, sort of being scrutinized, if you're worried about being criticized, if you're worried about, being too fat, too thin, cellulite, stretch marks, whatever it may be, right? Not living up to these societal standards of what feminine beauty is supposed to be, How are you supposed to relax and enjoy yourself?
Yeah.
You're not.
You're not. You're not. I mean, I think that's the point. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that is the point. You're not supposed to enjoy yourself, right? You're not. You're
You're
supposed
just
to
an
pretend
object.
to.
You're an
Yeah, you're supposed to
object
pretend
for
to.
male gaze, male pleasure, whatever word you want to insert there.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I'm so sorry these things happened to both of you, because they also happened to me.
Mhm.
And I think that's the sad part. The sad part is
Yeah.
like you start talking to other women and you
Mhm.
see this thread go through of these same stories, different names, different situations, same bottom line, go across
Mhm.
the board. And I
Yep.
think that's so sad that this is still the case. Like, we are adults here, and I still hear about this from younger people too. Like, I mean, all the things that you both are saying are, unfortunately, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, these are things that I talk to my clients about all the time. Like, the questions you're asking are exactly the things I ask my clients about, so that we can start unpacking that shame. And I think it's so sad that we've carried around that shame for so long, when clearly it's not us, it's them.
It is them. Yeah. And it's messed up because it is impacting pleasure in terms of like, think about like the female orgasm gap. So studies show that heterosexual women are less likely to enjoy orgasms than, for example, women in sapphic relationships or bisexual relationships. Why is that? Because of everything we're talking about, right? I mean, I also think there's a sort of lack of education around how to like pleasure female bodies, right? I think there's a lack of education around like what folks are doing, right? They're watching straight porn, right? And so they're sort of like, it's very, again, phallocentric. The assumption is like, okay, you do like 2 minutes of foreplay and then you get down to it for penetration. There's a lack of education around like most women, or I shouldn't say most women, a lot of women actually don't orgasm without clitoral stimulation, right? A lot of women don't orgasm based on penetration. There's a lack of information or education around that. And so people don't even know what they're doing in the bedroom. But again, also women are supposed to perform of like, you're enjoying it. You're supposed to, maybe fake an orgasm to also appease his ego. And at the same time, you're sort of like, battling around everything that's going on in your head in terms of like, do I look good enough? Do I smell good enough? Right? Do I sound good enough? Does he like it? Does he like it enough? But what about you? Do you feel good? Are you enjoying yourself?
Yeah.
Right? And are they worrying about that? Like,
No.
I'm not saying that, in terms of like men don't experience insecurities. Sure, they do. The kinds of insecurities are very different.
Yes.
Right? The kinds of pressures that they experience are very different than what we're experiencing around like body shaming and stigmas around enjoying your sexuality.
Yeah.
100%. And this to me also feels like a social justice moment. Kind of like that realization of the like female pleasure is empowering. And you've said that teaching is a form of social justice. How does a conversation about female pleasure, whether it's in the classroom or on a podcast, connect to a larger work of liberation?
It's a big question. How does it connect? I mean, I think it's like, if women are walking around feeling comfortable in their skin, if women are walking around feeling unashamed, to have desire, feeling unashamed to be sexual, or feeling unashamed to ask for what they want for, I think it reflects in terms of all parts of their lives, right? If they're not being consumed with living up to certain expectations that others have of them, they're using that energy elsewhere, right? In terms of, studies show that women who are high self-objectifiers tend to be, for example, less politically inclined, tend to invest less in terms of their educational goals, tend to invest less in terms of, self-improvement, et cetera. Because they're, investing a lot of time, energy, money, et cetera, of living up to certain beauty ideals, for example, societal ideals. And so I think it's really sort of liberating or empowering in terms of when women are like, just feeling a little, having more autonomy, or feeling more, sort of having more freedom, right? To be who they want to be and explore what that looks like outside of the need for approval or, sort of masculine appreciation, for example. And I think that's very threatening to patriarchal society, especially right now, right? In terms of this political moment.
Yeah.
When you're seeing like, the reemergence of trad wives, for example, right? This notion of like, like sort of supposed to be beautiful, cookie cutter, submissive wife that wants to pop out 20 million kids and like, stay at home and take care of them while her husband provides for her, right? And she's, I guess, supposed to be sexy, but not sexual. There's a difference, right? And so I think it's very empowering. I think it's very revolutionary in terms of women who are like, this is what I want. This is how I want it. This is who I am. I deserve it, right? And I don't need your approval.
Yeah.
God forbid God forbid we stop working for the approval of others. And that doesn't mean, again, like, even like I'm not trying to like, as a feminist, I'm not immune from it at all, right? I've navigated body image issues. I've experienced the pressure around that, right? I still do, right? I'm navigating, like, it's interesting getting older in terms of navigating ageism as well. That's super interesting as a woman, right? In terms of losing the cultural capital of like feminine youth, right? And suddenly being like, what does that mean, right? Especially as someone who, especially when I was younger, got a lot of unwanted masculine attention. And then suddenly, sort of like as you're aging, seeing how that changes, right? But also seeing how you're judged for that as well. Right? And so that's really interesting to navigate personally as a feminist, right? And again, I'm not perfect by any means. Like, I'm not trying to sit here and be a hypocrite. Like, no, I am absolutely like victim to all of those pressures as well. But I think it's
None of us
important
are
that at
free.
least, like, yeah, none of us are free, right? But at least you're conscious of it, right? And at least you're trying to be critical around it and navigate that in different ways in your individual life. I think it's like, I think for me, feminism is about choice, right? In terms of whatever that looks like for you, of having options and knowing that you have options and you can make that choice, whatever that looks like for you, right? So if for you, like, even if, identify as a feminist, but for you, it's important to look a certain way, good for you. Awesome, right? But at least you're aware of it. You're aware that you're making that choice. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so you have some autonomy, you have some agency.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I love that. That's so well said.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You know what? This is my brain's going on a side quest here, but it made me think of, if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend this new musical that just came out right around the same time as the election called Suffs.
Okay.
SUFFS. So it's short for suffragettes. So it's called Suffs the Musical. Very empowering. That got me through the election results for many months, listening to some of those songs because I was so upset. But it's about the suffragette movement. And it's very fun. They've got a lot of really great songs. One of the songs is called Great American Bitch. I love it. It's my favorite. It's a great song.
That sounds great.
It's a great
I
song.
love it.
You have to listen to it. But it's a very empowering musical, but they don't shy away from the problematic things that happen with the suffragettes either. So they very much talk in detail about the fact that the Black suffragettes were used and abused for that movement and the fact that they were cast aside to ultimately get to the goal. And they talk over everything, but it's a very empowering female musical. It's an all-female cast. It's crazy. I just love it. So highly recommend. You have to watch it. It's really good. But we are actually near the end of the podcast here. We only have one question left. And then we do kind of just a quick, just for fun, this or that, just to kind of end the podcast. But before we get into that, just for any woman listening right now who has ever felt like shame about what she wants, what she finds beautiful, what turns her on, what she watches alone at 11 p.m., whatever it may be, what do you want her to hear from you today and take away from this podcast?
It's a good question. I don't know. I think I have a lot swimming around in my head, right? Because I also not to deviate too much kind of thing, but I was thinking about this in terms of as a lesbian, right? So as someone who's in relationships with other women, does that make me immune to experiencing some of that stigma or shame? And I was thinking about it and I was like, no, absolutely not. Even with, I think it's an important conversation to have, maybe it's a whole other podcast conversation, but again, sort of right, the shaming that happens, how we in subcultures, we tend to basically reproduce some of the oppressions, right? And so how even as women, in terms of sapphic women, we tend to also oppress each other, right? In terms of body shame, for example, slut shame, as a femme, as a newly single femme, the slut shaming is real, bro. Seriously, right? In terms of in terms of my more masked partners don't experience the same sort of slut shaming that I do.
No.
Yeah.
Right. And so I feel not to completely go on a tangent, but I think it's also important as we're having this conversation. We've been talking a lot about heterosexual men, for example, heterosexual women, but I think it's also within the queer community, this happens as well. Right. We're reproducing these forms of oppression. Right. And how it's as queer women, it's people feel so comfortable making comments about your body or treating you
all
differently, right? In terms of you know what I mean? Of commenting if you've gained weight, or if you've lost weight kind of thing, right? Of congratulations, good for you. You've lost so much weight. Why am I being congratulated on that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I think it also exists within the queer community. I want to make that clear, right? In terms of this isn't just a heterosexual issue, you know, a heterosexual cisgender issue. It's not at all. And I think we need to sort of, in some ways, I feel it's almost more dangerous because I think we have sort of these this fantasy of it's sort of utopic within our, within our communities, right? And so we kind of turn a blind eye to it. And I think it happens just as much within the queer community.
I completely
And I just wanted to
agree.
put that out there because it's like, this isn't about like heterosexual like shame in any way, shape, or form. I think it's sort of maybe breaking down the systems of oppression that we internalize, right? And to like live in our bodies and our minds, how that impacts our relationships, in terms of
Yeah.
interpersonal relationships, romantic relationships, relationships with our family, etc. Right? I think it shows
Yeah.
up everywhere.
I'm
Yeah,
I'm
and
so glad you said that because it's so true.
yeah. No, it is. Yeah, we all have a way of upholding what we've
Yeah.
internalized. And so it's kind of like what you said at the beginning when we started recording is, it's all about being aware of your own
Mhm.
things. It's all about knowing the ways in which you have been affected and then maybe are continuing to do that. And then the more you're aware of it, the more you're able to stop yourself from doing it, right? And then that's the only way that it's going to get better, right? Is if we all do
Yeah.
that. Because, yeah, just naturally as women, no matter what our sexual preferences are or anything like that, we've all gone through this world and had the same things inflicted upon us as we grew up. So it's obviously it's not going to be different just because we're in a sapphic relationship, So yeah, it's all about really being aware of those things and correcting your own biases and your own judgments and your own things.
Yeah,
I
absolutely. I
really
think it's
like
about
your
social
statement.
narratives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was going to say, I really like your statement about feminism being about choice. And I think people take that in a lot of different ways. But I think this is exactly what we're talking about is you have to have awareness before you have action.
Mhm.
And building awareness around these things helps you make choices that you can feel proud of.
Mhm.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, like I lost my train of thought a little bit in terms of I was thinking about like, yeah, like I think it's around like societal, like it really is around societal narratives around masculinity and femininity that are really limiting, right? And
Hmm.
in my classes, for example, I'll talk about how, for example, sexism doesn't just hurt women, it hurts men,
Yeah.
right? And
Yep.
if you think about, for example, even within our queer community, right, in terms of how does sexism also show up, for example, in terms of masks, right? In terms of like masculine representing women, right? And reproducing certain forms of sexism and misogyny, right? And that's harmful. That's harmful to like our community, right? But it's so hard to escape, right? And so I don't think it's about sort of these inherent notions of like, just men are taught about like sexism and women are taught about like, how to like, sort of accept sexism, right? Versus like it's really a sort of narratives around masculinity and femininity that we
Yeah.
tend to believe as truth, right? Even though
Yeah.
they're, it's basically they're myths, right? They're myths
Yeah.
that we're taught and that like, they're sort of embedded into us over and over again. Like I like to say it's almost like it's in the water, it's in the oxygen, it's in the air we breathe, it's all around us. It's really difficult to escape. But I think part of the challenge is exactly that, right? In terms of at least questioning some of these things and maybe making micro changes, right? So like maybe tiny little changes that can make a huge impact,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. That's with
I was-
everything in the
yeah.
world. If you make micro changes in your life as you go, if everybody did that, made micro changes in their lives through for a lot of different things, we would see
Mhm.
a big shift, right? It's kind of like how people think that their vote doesn't matter when you're voting,
Mhm.
but every vote matters, right? Because
Yeah.
if every person votes and uses their voice together, that creates a large vote. It creates a large wave, right? So it's kind of the same idea. Like one drop of water has a ripple effect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think, and to answer your question, like the question you like, posed a little bit ago in terms of like, what is the message that I would like want folks to walk away with, I think is around sort of questioning things, asking questions. Why? Why is this okay? Why am I accepting this?
Yeah.
Who taught me this? Why should I be embarrassed? Why should I be ashamed? Right? Why
Oh,
do I
the
feel bad about my
dangerous
body?
why.
Why, right? Asking the questions, because I feel like once you start asking questions, it allows you to then create change in your lives, right? And create also change in terms of like your relationships with like whether it be your mother, your sister, your partner, etc., right? In terms of when I started asking those questions, it allowed me to have a different relationship also with, for example, the women in my life, right?
Yeah.
In terms of being able to have conversations with my mom about some of these things, right? Where she would make comments about my body and I'd be like, why do you think it's okay to ask that? Why do you think it's okay to ask me, like what I'm eating or like why do you think it's okay to like ask me why I'm wearing this, right? Why is that okay, right? And so again, being able to sort of question reality in ways that feel really subversive.
Yeah.
That would be
I
my
love
takeaway. Sort
that.
of question, ask why.
Yeah.
Why is this
I
okay?
love the
Why do I accept
dangerous
this?
why.
Yeah, right.
Curiosity,
Like
curiosity. It gets you
yeah,
every
Yeah.
time.
yeah, yeah. Like refusal to accept sort of the scripts that you've been given would be my sort of like takeaway, I guess.
I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
love
All right. Well,
that.
we've come to the fun part then. Just
Okay.
some fun, silly questions to end the podcast. It's more of
Okay.
a first thing that comes to your mind, not serious,
Okay. Like the pressure. Okay.
yeah, no,
Okay. I
it's
shall
not
try not to get
serious at
freaked
all,
out.
trust
Okay.
me.
Okay. All right.
No.
This is
Okay.
the most fun game we play.
It's just a
All
fun,
right.
silly way to end the episode. Yeah. We
Okay.
talk about a lot of serious things, so sometimes it's nice to have a little like fun, silly thing at the end.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so yeah, just try not to overthink it. Just your first instinct
Okay.
is your answer.
Sure.
First question, coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Me too. Binge it all or savor one episode a week?
Oh, I'm a binger.
Me too. I can't help it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I'm
Yeah.
obsessed with the show, like Love on the Spectrum. I literally like watched it like
Oh, it's so good.
like watched it in one day, like the new season, and now I'm like, and then you binge it, and now you're like, now what do I have to watch?
Yeah, dang.
But I can't help
Yeah.
myself. You know what
That's
I
how
mean?
I
Like,
feel
yeah,
with Bridgerton. Dang it.
yeah,
I
yeah,
know.
definitely binge. Yeah,
All right, beach or mountains?
I'm definitely a beach girl. I'm from Puerto Rico. I'm from Island, so like I grew up around the ocean. It's actually like my calm sort of safe place, the place where I feel like most comfortable and yeah, most at ease. I feel like
No, I love
it's very
that.
healing for me to be in the ocean. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that. So cook
Yeah.
at home or go out to eat?
Yeah, so I don't like to cook. Yeah, I'm not one of those people who's like very good at I can do it, right? If I have to, but I'm not very good at it. I don't enjoy it. I don't, I respect those people that like see it as a craft, right? And get really excited and do the recipes on that.
Totally.
Like, no, like, yeah. And so for me, it's like, unless, I'm with someone and they're cooking and I'll do the cleaning kind of thing, like, yeah, I'm a go out to eat kind of person, like, yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, or I try to like be responsible in terms of not eating out too much kind of thing. But even then, it's sort of like definitely that's my preference. I don't enjoy cooking.
Yeah.
Support
Yeah.
the economy,
You
you
know.
know?
Yeah, not saying every day, but
All right, early bird or night owl?
definitely night owl. I'm not an early bird at all.
Okay.
I'm the kind of person that like, yeah, don't talk to me for the first 2 hours of the day kind of thing. Like I'm cranky, you know what I mean? I'm like, why are people talking?
Yeah.
Like, why are people so upbeat so
Not
early?
until
Like,
after
no,
a cup of coffee. Not until
Yeah.
after the coffee.
exactly. At
No, I'm the
least,
same. I need
at
my tea.
least,
Yeah.
exactly.
So the question everyone wants to know, tacos or pizza?
Ooh, that's a hard choice. I'd probably say pizza.
Pizza?
Say yeah, like cheese pizza is probably one of my favorite foods.
Oh, that's
Okay.
a good one.
Like plain cheese pizza.
Okay, we've only got a few more.
Okay.
Text or call?
I hate when people call. I feel like I'm an introvert, like like I'm an outgoing introvert, like an extroverted introvert, but like really I'm an introvert. And so yeah, when people call, like I literally look at the phone and be like, "Why are you calling me?" Like, ew,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like I get freaked
Leave
out.
a
You know what I mean?
voicemail. Leave a voicemail, and I'll
voicemail.
decide if it's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
Exactly. Even voice notes, I think that's becoming really popular now. Like even that feels like an imposition. Like I'm like, what? Why? Just text me. Like,
Jerry and I
Yeah.
love voice notes.
We're like,
people love it. Like I get it. Like I have friends who like leave you an essay. Like you're like, you could have just texted me that. Like, I don't know why it feels so personal. Like it feels like an invasion of like my space. I don't know.
You're like,
Yeah.
yeah,
you're
no,
here
I
with
get
me all of
it.
a sudden.
Yeah.
Yeah. Text her for
Reality
sure.
TV or prestige drama?
I do love reality TV. I hate to like I hate watch it, right? Like I watch it and then like
Yeah.
analyze it. You know what I mean? And I'm
Don't
like,
we
these people are
all?
crazy, but I love it. Like right now I'm
Yeah.
living for the summer house drama, like Amanda and Wes. If you know, you know, right? So like yes,
Yeah.
reality TV. Yeah. Like it's absurd. And reality TV is so problematic in so many ways. It's a whole
Yes.
other conversation, especially how women are depicted. But I can't help myself.
None of us can.
All right, dogs or cat? Okay.
Yeah. I love dogs too,
Cat
but like
person
yeah.
too.
Yeah. I have
Yeah.
gorgeous. Yeah, my cat's name is Harold. I'm obsessed with him. He's the cutest. He
I
has a
love
smushy
that name. That
face,
was
so,
my
like,
grandpa's name.
oh, yeah, he looks like a
Love
grumpy
that.
cat. So like I was like, he needs a grumpy name. Like
That's
Yeah.
a
like,
perfect
Harold.
name. Perfect
yeah,
name.
definitely. Yeah.
Okay, last one: concert or comedy show?
I'm a music lover, like through and through.
Me
Like
too.
I'm constantly like creating playlists. I'm like, yeah, concerts all the way. And I appreciate people who love music. Like, yeah.
I'm a huge music lover too. Although
Same.
that question's really hard for me because I love as a theater major, I love a good in-person like any kind of show.
Mhm.
Comedy, theater, music, it's all good for me.
I mean, I hear that. I also love comedy. I'm obsessed. Like Robbie Hoffman, I think is hilarious, right? Like I love going to comedy shows, right? Tig Notaro, like yeah, I'm all
Oh,
about it.
Tig
Especially
Notaro.
especially if they're queer, you know what I mean? Fortune Feaster, like I'm all about it, you know what I mean? Yeah, so definitely like I also love comedy, but music is like
Music, yeah.
yeah.
I
where my
hear
heart
ya.
is, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Yami, for
course, and
coming
yeah.
in and doing this with us. We really appreciate
Yeah.
it. And you
No,
have
it's
so
much
much
fun.
knowledge, and I had a great time.
Yeah,
No,
I
I
did
had the
too.
best time. No, this was really fun. I really appreciate like being invited. Honestly, like this was great.
Keep showing up, even when it's messy. We'll see you next time in the closet.